Hi everyone, I'm Ali, currently working as a lead automation framework developer in eBay for the last six something years. And today I would like to talk to you about how to stop afraid of deploying to production right before you go home. Okay, this is a topic that most of us have already seen, and most of us are afraid of doing so, deploying at the day before we go to our vacation or on a weekend. So let me start with the presentation. So without further ado, so who's afraid to deploy 5 minutes before weekend, and why we actually afraid of doing so? So our agenda for today is what are usual fears of deployment, why we don't do this constantly, how to recognize those fears and move forward, and the changes in the mindset and the perception of development and deployment, what needs to be done programmatically and in our behavior in order to allow us to do those kind of deployments. So when we talk about fears of deployment, we first and foremost, we don't believe in our own code, right? Be that lack of tests, be that something that we have already encountered in our previous experience, okay? Lack of trust in deployment procedure, okay? If the deployment is flaky, if we need to do many manual steps, okay, we don't believe in those, okay? We maybe lack an efficient monitoring of our deployment, right? Uh, Whenever something happens, how do we roll back? What our procedures are for the rollbacks? Usually, those are manual, and people are afraid to do rollbacks, maybe because of the management doesn't like the word rollback. Okay, and overall, deployment is a time-consuming procedure. So what does it mean, lack of confidence? Okay, usually that means that we don't have enough unit tests, we're not covering enough business scenarios, we have plenty of flaky tests that don't give us enough information of or fail because of this. There are issues that are really irrelevant to the system that we are testing. Like we have network issues, we have database connectivity issues, uh, data that we are supposed to receive from somebody else that is not there. Okay, we rely too much on manual tests that consume time and usually are inconsistent. The issues with our deployment procedures and monitoring is whenever we use manual steps to deploy, okay, we do manual monitoring, okay, we actually sit in front of our computers and try to figure out what's going on with our machines, with our systems, with our products, okay, which is also time consuming. So it takes us time to find the actual issues in production. So what I would suggest how to move forward. Well, first and foremost, okay, let's build up confidence in our own code. So, which means unit tests are a must. Okay, we cannot deploy anything unless it's covered at least by a unit test. Okay, so for every line of code, there is a corresponding unit test, which will fail if the line is altered. Okay, uh, unit tests line coverage is as close to 100% as possible. Okay, with the, of course, obvious exception of configurations, POJOs, or whatever you say that is irrelevant. So you need to understand your own code. You need to understand the service you're testing in order to understand what classes might be omitted. Unit tests run for each and every pull request, meaning you cannot approve anything unless there is a full pass for this pull request, okay? And everything that fails, it just blocks the merge to main branch. Validate business scenario as soon as possible, okay? So cover every business scenario which you have previously discussed with the business owner, the product manager, project manager, okay, and put them into your progression and regression suits as suited. Okay, run business scenario in autonomous environment, which means you want to test the business scenarios without the need to validate networking, databases, and everything else. Okay, you want them to be mocked. Okay, so anything beyond your logic is being mocked. Add business test scenarios to PRs. Okay, so this way, whenever you want to test a new code, you want to merge something, you will know that the business is being covered. Regarding the flaky tests that we all know that they exist in our systems, okay, so first of all, let's review them, okay? Move everything that failed into network, downstream services, databases, whatever it, you name it, okay? Move them to unit tests and business scenarios prior to merge, okay? Let's leave the integration test to be integration, meaning that we want to validate the actual contracts and not the business logic. And automate everything, right? It's all good to view the actual results of your changes, but anything a human can do, automation can do faster, better, and more reliable. Okay, even in front end, which is usually the pain point for regression, you can always use third parties and automation suites like Percy that compares CSS to CSS, that compare actual screenshots to screenshots. So if you need those needed, you can also use something similar to that. Now, when we talk about a shifting left, okay, something that we hear more and more nowadays, meaning that if I talk about the business validation with complete integration after the code has been merged, you already have everything in place. You deploy this to the staging environment, and only then validate your business scenarios. Things will fail and might not indicate that this is the problem in your logic. Okay, if you shift to all the way to the left before the code merge, you will validate this even on developer machines, so developers can easily find bugs in their own code using this. This is an actual, and I'm not sure if you can see a third line from bottom. Okay, the line coverage for a real service that we're been using is almost 100%, is 98 something percentage here for coverage. And both baseline, which is a previous stable code, and the current PR that I want to merge to my main branch. So I have only things that are improved. That way I can merge. That way the merge is not blocked. There is no degradation in line coverage. There is no new bugs that were found. We can move forward. Talking about deployment procedure and monitoring. Okay, so what is the actual pipeline that I would like to implement everywhere is whenever there is a merge to the main branch of after PR was reviewed and after it was approved and after everything passed in the unit test and business scenarios, there is an automatic trigger that build this code, deploy this code to the feature pool, does some short, we can call it smoke test or sanity tests on the build, just to make sure that what you have built actually works. Okay, there you have a 200 okay for the API, something like that. Okay, you put the code on staging environment and run the integration test. Now, this is the first time that you actually connect all the dots, and you want to see the pass-through from your service to all underlying services. You want to make sure that you don't get 500 or 400 errors. Okay, you want to make sure that there was no contract change in between. You move this code to pre-production pool, which now simulates some of the traffic of the production. You take percentage of the production and just validate the traffic mirroring. So you actually validate that using real production data, it still works, and you now ready to move to production. All of those steps are completely automatic. Okay, you don't need to move them manually. You can build a pipeline with it in Jenkins or any other CI/CD tool. And in production itself, the production deployment should use a canary approach. A canary, if you're familiar with, is a small bird that was used in coal mines. The coal miners would take the canary with them and listen to the singing of the canary. So because the canary was so sensitive to poisonous gas, it would stop singing when it was safe enough for the miners to go back. This approach is also used in deployments, meaning that we want to go with a small portions of machines every time and do validations before we move forward. So we need to define rollback standards that triggering any of those parameters will cause immediate halt to deployment procedure and rollback to previous stable production manifest or code. I would suggest using deployment in 133 configuration. So we deploy to the 1% of the machines in current region. We validate that everything is up, running. There are no degradation in this percentage of the machines. We can also use standard like CPU memory latency triggers, and we can also use maybe monitoring of your business scenarios there. Okay, and then deploy to the 33% of the machines in the same region. Do the same validation now on more machines, more traffic going through. Move forward to the next 33%, etc. Once the first region is done, you can move to the next region, and on any step of this deployment, if the system is breached, if there is a trigger to rollback, the system should roll back automatically to the previous version. During your deployment, you should define email, Slack, Teams, your organization chat, whatever, notification for failure, and also success notification. Okay, so failure in any step, of course, will send email to the group, okay, that you want to know that something went wrong, on which step it went wrong, and that the rollback was successful. So you need to receive a success email in both cases. Once, if you fail to deploy, then you want to receive a success message for the rollback. If you succeed to deploy and everything went smoothly, you want to get a success message for the deployment. It's a good practice to look for those success emails, because if you don't receive them after you push your code to main branch and you expect this kind of success message after, let's say, 2, 3, 5 hours, whatever it takes, because it's automatic, so you don't need to care how long does it take. But if you didn't receive it in the time that you expected, it's worth checking what might have gone wrong. Refine your safeguards configuration every now and then, because the last thing that we want is a false positive alert and rollbacks, because we have defined something that is irrelevant or not correct. And on the other hand, you don't want to proceed if something is wrong. Okay, you don't want to have memory leaks in production. But on the other hand, if there is a spike in errors that goes down after a minute, you don't want to roll back because of that. And add business-related monitoring, like traffic related to your business, okay, business metrics that you defined with your product owners. Improvement to rollbacks, okay, so deployment procedure always keep the previous working code at hand. Okay, you don't need to find what was the previous version. You don't need to remember that. The CI/CD will take care of that for you. So before you start, before it starts with the deployment, it has the previous stable version at hand. And in the case of production issue, full rollback as fast as possible. Then and only then start analyzing the issue, because we don't want to harm the production in any way. So once we have done the rollback, then we have enough time to review the logs. We can simulate this in pre-production, maybe take one of the production machine out of traffic and try to figure out there with the new code what's not working. But this is happening only after successful rollback. Now, maybe even more important changes that need to be done is the perception of the deployment. So adding test monitoring and rollbacks is a must, okay? But the core change is change of mindset, as what we do and what I suggest here is not just to speed up the process. It's nice to have, but this is not the objective. The objective is to have a better and robust production. And in order to do that, we must follow these points, okay? So there is only one production branch, and this is your protected branch, right? You cannot deploy from any other branch. You cannot deploy from your own feature branch or anything like that. There is only one branch that is being protected, and a developer cannot merge code to the main branch without approved PR and only after all tests pass. The other change that is very useful is having PRs that are small, okay, just a few files, because frankly, we all know that PRs that have dozens of files, nobody looks after a few of them, okay, and you just become a rubber stamp for, yes, I have seen the file, it looks okay to me, and the tests have passed, so you move forward. This is usually bad practice to have huge PRs. You might step on somebody else's code. You might miss something that somebody did not on purpose, but because they saw that it will be a better solution. So when you have just a few files, you can go forward. Usually you can achieve this if you set a feature flag or you hide your code. So even if it's not really ready for production, if it doesn't break your production, you can go forward, right? It can be in production sleeping, and once the code is ready, you just unhide it. PRs are recent, okay? If PR is not reviewed in a couple of days, it's usually irrelevant and should be closed. Don't hold your PRs for weeks and months. Nobody remembers what was the purpose of the PR. Nobody remembers what were the other changes that went so far. And okay, so if it works, deploy the production. So as I said earlier, okay, you don't want the user story to be ready, okay, because if your code doesn't break anything, okay, it compiles, it doesn't break anything in production using the tests, it's hidden behind feature flag, feel free to deploy it. It won't do any harm, okay, but you won't have to maintain that code anymore. It's always easier and safer to switch feature flag than release multiple changes at once. We all know what a mess it is if you try to release several PRs at once. Some of them might break, and you won't know which one was problematic. Parallel programming and reviewing, okay, what seems like a resource waste, okay, like when you do parallel coding, okay, it actually creates a better code. More people see the code from the beginning. You don't need to explain. It's easier to find the bugs when you only just coding them than when the code is ready and you ask from a peer that has never seen the code. Yeah, just go over it. Okay. So if you do parallel programming, yes, it takes two people to finalize the code, but then those two people are familiar with the code. Now, this perception chain also require some changes from other people, not just developers. Okay, so business owners will have to own the user story. Okay, they should be well described and have clear goals, because when we deploy to production, we need to understand what we're deploying and if we have a definition of done and what is actually being expected from us. And tasks derived from user story should be as small as possible, right, with clear goals and the steps to achieve those. Accountability. You write your code, you're responsible for it to work in production. So don't just wait on the quality assurance to give you a final stamp that everything works. Something is wrong. You, as a developer, is responsible for it. You wrote the code, own it. Uh, Quality assurance is a common goal, and QA engineers are there to help, okay, not to remove responsibility from the business owners or the developers. This is especially important for companies that don't rely on quality assurance engineers. Some don't even have those. Okay, so developers write their own code and their own validations, or they validate each other code. Now, I just wanted to give a quick tour on how it is done in our company. As you hopefully can see, in the last 7 days, some of the services went 9 full releases to production, meaning almost 2 releases per day. Okay, and some of those took a day to release from when we opened the PR until the code was in production. But since this is completely automatic, we don't care about it. Okay, some of them are as quick as 9 hours from when the developer opened the PR until it was fully released. And if we look on different applications the last 30 days, uh, 57 deployments in 20 days, almost 3 deployments a day to production, 1.5 deployments per day. And all of them, as you can see, take less than 2 days to deploy. So from the beginning to the end, it takes a very quick turnaround. Okay, and without the need to rollback. And if there is a rollback, it's being done automatically. So now hope to answer questions. Please challenge me. Okay, I hope this will be a discussion.
We have one in the
Yes.
chat.
So yes, I already see in the chat. Great. So why, after deploying the stage point, why not both verification, test, and integration run simultaneously? That's a good question. And frankly, you can run those when you run your PR. Integration tests, when they require full uh, uh, full environment, right? They are unmocked. They do take time, maybe less because they don't no longer have business logic. They only have contracts. But if something fails there, does it mean that your code is incorrect or not? Okay, so usually I take the integration test in the later stage, only to make sure that we divide between the two. If you're more if you're confident enough that your environment is stable in staging, and you can run those without the business logic in staging at the moment of the PR, and the developers can wait until the PR is done with the integration tests. That's a good approach. There is nothing wrong with that. From my experience, it just not robust enough, the environment itself, only because of that. Great. So another question from Philip: how do you manage to make small PRs? How do you handle refactoring during future implementation, where, for example, you spot that something could be improved? So how do you manage small PRs? When at the end of the day or end of the week, you have a code that compiles, when you have something that is ready to be moved forward, and you don't need to work on that anymore, right? When you have completed your task, you don't need to go back to your code, deploy it. Okay. Small PRs, it doesn't mean that it's a few lines of code. It's usually not many files that you need to move through. And if this code is not ready yet, right, as is, it's not ready for production, but it doesn't fail, hide it behind a feature flag. Okay, so make it like, if the feature flag is present, don't run this code. Okay, so that way you can make it very small. If the implementation, for example, like, okay, you have an improvement, and this improvement goes through several files. Okay, it doesn't mean that always you can do this in small chunks, but if you have something like you add a line of code to multiple files to make something, it's easy to move through. And in this case, if you make it a parallel development, for instance, it's easy to explain the code from the beginning. So it's not always possible, but it's a goal. It's something that you want to strive to achieve. How would you build process when there's a big deployments model, few months of teamwork? So this is exactly what we would like to move from, right? You talk about, Dmitry, about cascading deployments. You want to have all of the team works deployed at once. Usually this is the recipe for disaster, because you have a very long deployment process, a very long quality assurance process, and then you have a very long deployment process. All of those happens in a few months from now, from when you start. When you go to the deployment, you have no idea usually what was done a few months back. So instead of doing those, build small chunks of deployments, move this teamwork into individual work. And as an individual, when you have your code ready, okay, don't wait for others to complete their work. And that's why I said that the mindset change is change for everybody, not just the developers, because if you don't have this approval from your managers, from your PMs and everybody else, you're just one person alone that sorry, trying to do this. But if you use more agile approach, if you're instead of every few months, you go to to sprint, like 2 weeks of deployments, once in 2 weeks, you start with that instead of every few months. Okay, you speed up the process there. You make your code smaller, right? And then you can gradually move to deployments every few days, not just at the end of the sprint. Okay, this is the goal you should be going towards. I hope I explained myself there. Any other questions, guys? Not, you're more than welcome to contact me on LinkedIn or any other way, I will be more than happy to chat with you, maybe give you some hints on your specific issues that you might encounter in your company. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eli, for this webinar. It was
Thank you
great.
for hosting me.
Our webinar has come to an end. I'd like to extend a big thank you to everyone for participating, and a special thank you to the speaker for a captivating topic. It was a pleasure having you all here today. Have a great rest of your day.